Welcome to Generational Differences with Beckham and Brett.
All right, and we are back for our third episode of Generational Differences. Right?
Third episode, and this ain't our final, but I was just about to say third and final. I don't know. I just did something weird.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, our last episode wasn't great, was it? Well, it wasn't bad. I wasn't,
Yeah.
I don't think I was on. Do you think I was on? I didn't feel on.
Not really.
I was off because, so I haven't talked about this, but you know that I used to work in wildland fire. So I used to fight wildfires. I was on a hotshot crew. Well, I was on a hotshot crew.
You were in Nevada.
One of the guys I worked with, we think we're on the same crew, the same hotshot crew for 3 years. Anyways, he got diagnosed with glioblastoma. So
Which is brain cancer?
Brain cancer. Yep. And he wasn't much older than me. He was 4 years older than me. So we were both in our 20s working in fire together. And yeah, PSA for everybody, especially if you worked in wildland fire, go get cancer screenings. So, as you're at a higher risk for cancer, I'm actually due for my colonoscopy this year. Gonna be a good time.
Yeah.
Did I ever tell you about when I went to go in for it, and the guy that was putting me under right before he put me under, and he was trying to joke with me, and he's like, "Boy, you're not in a great mood." And I look at him, I'm like, "Because you're about to put a camera up my butt." And then I passed out.
I was what, 40 years old?
I think you were got that. So anyways, long story short, but he, just like you, he had a little boy that was on the spectrum, and we had just been talking a couple weeks ago, and I knew that he was sick, but I didn't know he was that sick. And so, made by surprise. And then instead of taking a break and probably not making another episode, I decided to try and make an episode, and I was unfunny.
Yeah, you weren't very.
So I figured we could talk about, I could tell fire stories.
Yeah, those are the go.
I hardly ever tell you any of my fire stories.
Yeah.
Do you remember any of my fire stories?
No. Not
But you
really.
do remember one of them. You always bring it up when we're camping. I think that's the
Yeah.
only one that... You remember which one that is?
Nope.
You don't remember?
Yeah, you sat on a cactus.
Sat on a cactus. Didn't sit on a cactus. I slept on a cactus. I rolled over
that's
onto
even worse.
and it was on my butt. And then I got quills in my butt for a couple of days. That was a good time. Always look where you put your sleeping pad down. Fun parts of sleeping out in the desert. I had a camel spider too under my sleeping pad one night.
Don't they follow your shadow because it's super hot, so they...
I don't know. I just woke up in the morning and it was like a scorpion spider, weird looking thing that was like an inch long. I was like, "What is that?" Someone's like, "Oh, it's a camel spider." I'm like, "Full."
I'm just gonna say this, but have you ever seen a reddish ant out in the wild?
Well, yeah, I've seen a lot of red ants out in the wild.
Furry red ants?
Oh yeah, I have.
Don't get stung by those because their name is cow killer.
Yeah. Where are they at?
They're in desert areas like Nevada and Arizona, sometimes even in Washington. And down here. They really just kind of live around on this East Coast part.
West Coast?
Yeah, West Coast.
Best Coast. Okay. Yeah, no, I think I did see him out there. I might have actually been taking a picture of one once.
Really?
Maybe. A lot of my pictures got lost in all the moves we did. So, but I still have a few of them. But anyways, the fire story I was gonna tell.
Yeah.
So you got to start every good fire story with a good opening. So you sit down and you say there I was, fire all around me. Not really. No, This is a fun one. So this was in Idaho, and we drove up to McCall. So it's actually now like a resort town. And back then it was getting that way. But so anyways, this guy that had passed away. He was on the crew during this, and it was kind of actually one of the most fun assignments we had. So we were in McCall, and there was a fire that was burning in
White
Middle Fork.
Sands?
Huh?
White Sands?
No, it was burning on the Middle Fork of the Salmon. So you know how you and I go rafting on the Snake?
Yeah.
So there's another river called the Salmon River that dumps into the Snake, which then dumps into the Columbia. So anyway, and it's kind of all up in that area where our family's at. So anyways, we go in there, and they're like, "Hey, we're gonna fly you in a helicopter out to this fire." And we're like, "Okay." And so it's on the Middle Fork of the Salmon, and it's all wilderness, so there's no roads there. There's no way to get into it. But we had to go do structure protection on. There was a historic cabin, and then there was like a resort thing there, and then one of the cooler places, and I'll talk about it later, was this guy, one of the guys who invented the fish finder, actually had this huge mansion cabin that had its own hydroelectric power plant. But I'll talk about that in a little bit.
Wow.
Yeah, it was cool. You would have loved it. So anyways, they're like, "Well, we don't have any way to get you there, so what we're going to do is we're going to fly you to this ranch that's along the river there, and then we'll figure out how we're going to get you down the river to these structures that we need you to protect." And so anyways, we get this long, like, I think it's like a 45-minute helicopter ride. It was a long helicopter ride to get us out there. So we flew out there, landed at this ranch, and then walked down to the river, and they were like, "Okay, we figured it out. We're going to get you guys jet boats to go down the Middle Fork." And so we're in the Middle Fork this time of the year. It was like August, mid-August, late August. So the river is actually pretty low. Do you want to know a fun fact about jet boats? So jet boats can run in like 6 inches of water.
Wow.
So they can't take off in 6 inches of water, but once they planed out and they're actually going at their cruising speed, they can run in 6 inches of water. So they were like, "The fastest way we can get you up and down this river is by jet boat." And by this time, like the river was running pretty low. And so these two guys in jet boats come, and they grab, I think it was two of the 3 squads were assigned to this. And we're like, "Okay." And so we go and we get on the jet boats, and the guys, they had their steering wheels, but instead of a steering wheel, they had these huge, it looked like a huge aluminum like bar. And we get in and we're like, "What's the aluminum bar for?" And they're like, "Oh, that's how we steer. You guys are going to want to hang on because we're going to have to make some pretty quick turns to stay in the deep parts of the river. If we don't, we're going to hit a bunch of rocks." And so we got a helicopter ride, and then we jumped in a jet boat, and we were going down jet boats down the Middle Fork of the Salmon. And the Middle Fork of the Salmon, there's not hardly any jet boats on it because it's so remote out in the middle of the wilderness. So they really don't have a good way to get jet boats there. So it was like one of the few, there was only like a handful of jet boaters that went up and down the Middle Fork. And so anyways, we're going down the Middle Fork, and we're zipping and back and forth, like dodging rocks coming down, and like it was actually super fun. And so then we get there, we get to the first structure, and it was like a historic structure. And the other crew, we'd helped the other part of our crew actually load up all their stuff into a helicopter because they had to take a helicopter ride too. And their helicopter ride, they had to go to a lookout and do structure protection on that. And so anyways, we got to the first place. It was actually super cool. It was this like wide open field, and this guy had a really cool job. So he was the caretaker of this of this historic structure, and I think it was like a trapper's an old like trapper's like residence or something like that. And they'd kept a lot of the stuff that was originally there in it. And there was a caretaker there, and all of his stuff was running. He had internet. He had like satellite internet, which was weird at the time because it was like 2006 or 2007. I think he had like, but it was all run. It was all run on solar power. So he had his own little residence thing there that he did, and like he had power, and but he was just out there in the middle of nowhere, and he was all like, you know, he had a radio and stuff like that he could go back and talk to the forest, but he was out there kind of like by himself with his wife, and they didn't really have any good way to get in and out. So they were just kind of there for the summer. And then when backpackers, that's the only way you could get to the structure was backpacking.
Oh.
So when backpackers would come and visit, they'd, give the tour or whatever and just make sure that nobody's vandalizing anything or anything like that. So that was the first place we went and did structure protection. And that day was kind of crazy. So we did the structure protection, and actually what we did was we burned out that night. So the fire was pushing towards us, and so we brought all of our drip torches, and we just kind of burned around this cabin and kind of sent fire back towards the main fire that was going to come towards us. And we had to work pretty late that night, and then we got up in the morning and started doing cleanup on it. And that the other helicopter that had taken our the other part of the crew like crashed, and we heard over the radio that it had crashed, and we didn't know whether they didn't say. They said that there was no survivors on the helicopter crash, and we just didn't know anything for for half a day, because they had to go notify all the families of the people who passed away. And so we were just out there in the middle of nowhere on our radios, and for all we knew, like 5 or 6 of our guys could have been dead in a helicopter crash, because we heard over the radio that a helicopter had just gone down, and they gave the tail number and all that stuff. So we're like, oh crap. And we found out later that it ended up just being the helitack. It was sad. It was the helitack crew and the pilot that had gone down, and that was hard for some of the guys on the crew, because and we had talked to some of those folks too, where we just kind of like were chatting with them, and they actually rode up to the lookout with these people and talked with them for a couple days, and then it was like when they passed away. So they were kind of sad about that. But then we got to go down, and there was this resort that was like a fishing resort thing that was super cool, where everyone kind of got their own cabins and stuff like that. And that place, people did get jet boated in and out, or they would raft, and then they would stay at the resort thing. And that was a lot of fun. Like, looked like a fun place to stay. So we worked on that for a couple days. And then we went down to the guy that invented the fish finder. So you remember when we went and visited my friend Brandon?
Yeah.
And he had his fish finder that showed all those fish? Like, he invented the original fish finder.
Really?
Yep.
That's
He
crazy.
wasn't there, but he had made so much money off of inventing the fish finder that he had a guy that lived there year round when he wasn't there, and took care of the property. So you can imagine this. It's this huge cabin out in the middle of like the wilderness, and it has a full lawn with I think they had like lawn toys, and it had like a little pond, and huge, beautiful cabin. He had a Toyota truck from the 90s that had less than 3,000 miles on it, and he had it barged in. So they floated the truck down the river to his place, and he just used it around this little 3-acre property for like maintenance and stuff like that, and it had less than 3,000 miles on it. And at this time, it was like 15 or 20 years old. So that was the only thing it was up there for, which was kind of crazy. And then the coolest part about it was there was a creek that ran down from the mountains behind it, and he took a pipe and he piped the water into this little miniature hydroelectric power plant that he had. And since it was a perennial spring, it always had water running through it. He always had power to his house from this little tiny hydroelectric power plant. So he had like his own little wasn't a dam. It just ran through the turbine, and the turbine powered the whole property. And this guy just lived up there, and that was his job, was just to take care of the property, make sure nobody vandalized it, and keep like mow the lawn and do all that cool stuff. So that was super cool. So we did structure protection on that. And then I don't think we had to burn around that property. We didn't have to burn around the resort or that property. And then we hung out there for a couple more days. And then they put us in the jet boat again and drove us down the river the rest of the way. And then we stopped off. I forget which city we stopped off at, but normally where you pull off after the middle fork of the salmon, and got ice cream. And then we were going to go back to McCall. And when we went back to McCall, this was a fun part of the trip. So when we went back to McCall, they were like, hey, because we're only allowed to stay out for 14 days. It had been a long season for us, and we were like, we got to go home. We can't stay here. We can't rest here for 2 days in place and stay here for another 14 days. But we're like, so we got to drive home. And they're like, well, we don't want you to drive home because we don't want to lose you as a resource. So we were like, okay, well, then we got to figure out a way to get us home. And they're like, how about you take one of the smoke jumper planes? Those are the guys that jump out of the planes on the fires. They're like, what if we let you take one of our big smoke jumper planes and we'll fly you back to Salt Lake City? And so and I've got a picture of it, I'll show you it, but we got to ride back in a DC, I think, what are they, DC-3s or DC-10? So we got to fly back in one of those old, like, I think World War II planes. And so we're in this DC-3, and when we were flying in it and back in Salt Lake, it's not like an airline like you've got, it's a prop plane. And so when we were flying, I was in the tail of the plane, and I was moving back and forth like this, but I could see the front of the plane staying straight, and like I could feel myself moving back and forth as we were flying back to Salt Lake. Like we were all over the place, and we're like fishtailing. And one of the guys on the crew, he was like, I get airsick, and before he even got on there, and they're like, oh well, hopefully it won't be too rough. And we're all sitting there watching him, and he's like, huh? He was like, yeah, he started turning green like almost immediately when we got up into the air. And then I think he almost filled up 3 barf bags. He was but he was like so casual about it. He would just like sit there and he'd like kind of look around and he'd just be like, what? What's that? He kept just doing that for the whole thing. Then he'd shake his head and he'd be like, and you felt bad for the guy, but he just kept getting, and he would finish, he'd finish a bag, and he'd like roll the top of it and seal it up and put it down over on the side, and then he'd like get another bag open, and he's like, oh. So yeah, so then we got flown back down there, and then and then we got flown home. So then we got to go home, got driven home. And then we came back for another 14 days. So it was a lot of fun. I can't remember what we did the other half of the 14 days, but I do remember that part of the trip. So, but you didn't like, how cool that stuff was. And the only thing you liked about that story is you're like, oh yeah, this guy's barfing in the back of the airplane.
It's hilarious. I like all the other parts, like about the hydroelectric house and the satellite thing, and like it's a little bit sad about the helicopter crashing and no one surviving, but yeah, I liked it. But I liked the part best was him going in the back.
Well, the jet boat was fun too. The jet boat was like super crazy. You remember you went out on your uncle's pontoon boat? It's like that, only like way faster, and it can do sharper turns. And so we were doing that down a really narrow river. So it was like crazy. It was super crazy going down. And like we're watching the guy's got like the stick, and he's just like pushing it and pulling back. And like we're like sitting down the river. It's like, oh, I hope we don't hit a rock. Yeah, it's crazy. crazy time. All right. Well, anything else to say about that? Do you have any questions about? Oh, about fire,
Yeah, well,
colonoscopies, about.
brother. Um, yeah, did you actually see the smoke?
We started our own fire, and we did see the smoke from the fire. That's what I was saying. Like we burned out around a lot of those structures. So
Yeah.
we started our own fire and we were burning at night to protect the structure. And it was in a big open field. And then so what we did was we just went out to the tree line and we prepped and then we just burned right along the tree line and kind of like lit a low grade fire back out towards the main fire that was pushing towards us. Oh, and the other cool part was we saw a sky crane, those great big helicopters. One
Yeah.
right down right where we were working because it was one of the deep spots in the river. And they've got a snorkel. And so this helicopter came down and hovered above the water, sucked a bunch of the water out of it, and then did that a couple of times and like flew off and was fighting the fire and come back and it was his dip site. So it was like super cool. We got some really good pictures of that.
I'm still laughing about the guy
Puking. Yeah, that was Bob. Bob did not like flying in planes. Bob wasn't a plane guy. He was like yakking all over the back of the plane. Everyone's like, "Don't get it on me." He's like,
Yeah, he's just casually putting it all in a bag.
"Yeah, yeah, all right." Well, I think we're about due for a break. So with that said, we'll be back in a few minutes after a break. All right, and we are back from our break.
Yeah.
So our next topic we were going to talk about was, we're debating this on the way to dinner, but I think we're going to talk about tornadoes, huh? And you're going to
Yeah.
talk about, that's one of your favorite subjects, Twister. The original Twister was like when you were like 4 or 5 years old. That was like the thing you wanted to watch all the time. And then
Yeah, and then they made a trilogy to it because the one before that was Tornado, then Twister, then Twisters.
there was only two. There was the first one.
Nope, Tornado, and then Twister, and then Twisters.
I don't think there was a tornado.
Tornado exclamation point.
I think so.
Let
Are
me,
you sure? Or are you just making that up?
let me see.
Well, we're not going to research it here. Well, that's one of our takeaways. So research to see. I'm pretty sure it's only two.
Yeah.
You seem to think there's a third, so we'll research that. But you love Twister, and then you've been interested in weather phenomenons for like forever, right? And specifically, like, I think do you still want to be a tornado chaser?
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about that.
If I maybe I could like study the tornadoes to make an advanced timing. So like maybe after that, like we can know when a tornado is happening prior to when it is, like a few hours before, and it's like you better get to hurrying because the tornado's coming in a few hours, buddy. So I also just want to see the thrill of an EF5 tornado coming at my face, but
The thrill of an EF5. I don't know if you wanted to see the thrill of an EF5 tornado.
no, it would be horrifying, but you know what I mean.
Why don't you talk about the different classifications of tornadoes then?
Ooh, that would be amazing. So, EF stands for Enhanced Fujita Scale. You're probably thinking, well, what does enhanced mean? Like, why is there an enhanced? Because back then, the Fujita scale was measured by how much it destroyed. Now, if you think about it, I mean, measuring something of how much it destroys is bad. Like on the EF scale, technically a tornado could have been an F5 if they landed in Brooklyn, but they would actually be an EF0 on the enhanced Fujita scale because it destroyed a lot. Now we can measure wind speed and of how it was. So the range of so let me get basically EF0 is like a small moderate tornado that that if you were standing in the middle, it would pick you up, definitely, but it couldn't pick up a car. And it might tore off some shingles from your house, maybe like rip some branches off a tree, but it's minor.
An enhanced dust devil.
Basically, but no dust, just dirt and muddy stuff and, some debris. Debris.
Did you just call it debris?
Yeah, debris. It's a joke, debris.
I know
debris.
debris is a joke. Go get the debris.
Oh, right, Deborah.
So-
Deborah, hardly know her.
So EF0, so enhanced Vegeta it originally was just the
Vegeta.
amount of destruction,
It
but the
made.
enhanced, what was the enhancement?
So basically of how, what are the miles per hour, if it was a wedge tornado or a rope tornado, because rope tornadoes are usually these little spindly ones that are all twisted out of shape and they're all super thin. And then cone tornadoes are your regular sized tornadoes. And then wedge is a different story because they're these giant long tornadoes with horrible wind speeds, and and they're normally thought of low hanging clouds until you get too close, then it's over for you.
So what's an EF1? Can you take us through all the scale? What the
EF1 is basically, again, a moderate tornado. It might tear up some very small trees. Maybe it might maybe it just might do it might pick up your car a little bit and then move it a few inches, but nothing serious. It'll definitely pick up your trampoline and throw it into your neighbor's backyard. So, yeah.
EF2?
Yeah, EF1.
But what did EF2 do then?
EF2s are moderate to severe tornadoes. The moderate ones are not very bad because all they'll do is pick up your car, move it a little bit, but you would still want to stay away from them. Still, they're not they're dangerous if you're in them. And basically, the top part of EF2, where it's not really an EF2 but it still is classified, is that you should stay far away from it. It could maybe break your windows and maybe could do some pretty bad damage. And EF3s, again, they're pretty severe but not bad, so they'll just swirl around, maybe break a wall or two, maybe tear off your roof. If it's really bad. The tear off your part of your house is the severe part, but they're pretty mellow. They're not really normally pretty strong. And EF4s are basically these giant tornadoes that you should definitely stay away from. And if you hear a report that you're an EF4, get in your bunker, get in your tornado bunker if you have one. If you don't, you go into a basement. If you're in California, you're screwed if you EF4. Because for some reason why they don't let basements be a thing, and if EF4, you're not safe in your bathroom, even if you put a mattress over your the tub and then hide in the tub, and pipes won't protect you if you're in an EF4. They'll just get torn away and you'll get hit with debris, and it'll debris and then tear you into the sky and totally just murder you.
And then EF5.
Ooh, oh no. If anybody's watched Twister, they'll know what I'm talking about. Remember that cornfield scene of where that giant wedge tornado was chasing them down?
Mm-hmm.
And then they used the belt, of all things, to hold them, and it worked?
That didn't seem very
First
real.
of all, the pipe would have gone out that they strapped the belt to. And second of all, the belt would have snapped like a pencil. So, that scene was pretty, wasn't that,
If they didn't get hit by all the debris. The flying debris.
Yeah,
To watch
no.
out for those flying
They were in
debris.
the middle of a tornado too. That's the stupid part too. If they were in the middle of a tornado, that little rope or whatever, that belt, it would have snapped. And the girl that was hanging on to the man who was hanging on to the belt, the girl would have flown away and the man was
He would
stuck
have
on.
became a flying debris.
But they would have just gotten destroyed and they would have gotten killed. But other than that, it's a pretty good movie, and the EF5's basically that. Now in Twisters, they have a more good thing. It was also a giant wedge. It had probably 200 to 300 mile an hour winds. It was pretty bad. And there's a very, very, very slim chance if you survive an EF5. Like maybe 1 in a million. It's really hard.
You're gonna move to the Midwest and be a storm chaser then, you're saying?
Maybe I might go to Texas because they have the most tornadoes. They have over 1,000 tornadoes a year.
Well, we were there last year, right?
Yeah, we were in Dallas, which was actually the place of where the least tornadoes happen. But do you want to know something? There was a 5% chance in that little storm that we were driving through that it could have been a tornado. It could
You mean
have
the
been
one
a
that
tornado
the one
cloud.
that hit the severe thunderstorm we got when we were staying
Yeah,
at
of
the
where it
hotel?
was like thunder and every second it was like boom, 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 boom. And I just got out of bed and started watching it, and then every few minutes there would be this giant one and it'd be like, and I would have been like, and then there's this loud thunder and it's like, yeah.
Yeah, that was fun. That was actually cool. We went down there for Dallas for the eclipse. We got to see the
Eclipse,
total
yeah.
solar eclipse.
Humidity just dropped the second it became
Yeah,
total.
it was all cloudy and like we weren't even sure if we were gonna get to see the eclipse.
And then all of a sudden,
Remember I made you your Texas waffle? That was the state of Texas.
yeah.
And then I squirted because it was cloudy and we weren't gonna get to see the eclipse, and I squirted whipped cream all over the top of it, and I was like, look, it's our weather for today. And then you got all mad at me. You're like, stop, it's not funny. We drove all the way here from California. Now we're not even going to get to see the eclipse. I was like, and then because the humidity dropped, all the clouds burned off and it was perfect.
And yeah, and then we got to see it. You know what's weird? The humidity dropped the more it was submerged, if you noticed.
It what?
It like the humidity dropped like every time it would like change a different stage. It would actually like become like a different humidity. It would like drop every few times.
Yeah.
Until it became the full eclipse, then it dropped totally, and then there was no clouds whatsoever.
Yeah, that was crazy. Yeah, and you could feel it drop, and then it got cool. And then birds started flying around and making noise.
They actually stopped if you didn't listen. Like, if you listen, it was like all you could hear was the people screaming because of the eclipse.
Because they were so excited for it.
They were like screaming like, oh, my headphones fell off.
They weren't screaming like that. You're exaggerating a little bit.
Yeah, but no, they were pretty excited while I was running around like a hillbilly.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a good time. So you think you're going to move to Dallas and go chase tornadoes, huh?
Yeah, not Dallas, but somewhere else that's like super flat and like there's a bunch of like, that kind of stuff.
Oh, you're getting a bad storm. There was a couple times when I fought fire and like the wind got really bad and then you got a lot of
didn't
fire.
You one time see a fire tornado?
Seen a couple of them, but they're not like fire tornadoes. They're just fire whirls. They're like the fire spins up into the sky. Yeah, it's kind of cool. Cool to watch, but also kind of scary depending on where you're at.
Because if you're near it, then
you don't want to be anywhere near it. I always saw them from pretty far away, but it was an indicator of like unpredictable fire activity because like like dust devils and stuff like that. That's all unequal heating of the earth and unequal air, which means that the wind's going to get unpredictable. Like when you start getting those sorts of things, right?
Yeah. One time we drove through Nevada and there were these giant like thunderstorms, but we never saw the thunder. And there were like dust devils under it. And I'm like, Ooh, maybe one of them will like turn into a tornado or something.
Yeah,
Never
I
happened.
remember you were wishing for that.
It would have been
Anything else? Anything else to say in summary about your tornadoes?
tornadoes you should stay away from no matter how cool they look or mesmerizing. Also, if they look like they're in one place, they're either heading away from you, like literally straight away from you, or they're heading straight towards you.
So
So
you're telling people to stay away from them, but you're going to grow up and go chase them.
eh, it's a meteorologist's job for tornadoes.
If you were a meteorologist, you'd be telling them to stay away from tornadoes.
Yeah.
So, like, if you would move there and you were going to drive into a tornado, what kind of a car would you be driving into the tornadoes?
I would probably do a big truck that's heavy. Maybe like a Cybertruck because they're bulletproof glass, and that's not really true. If you saw in the beta test, it shattered. So,
I
and
saw
they're
I saw some headline that said that they're more dangerous than a Ford Pinto, but I don't know if there was anything to back that up. There was Ford Pintos back in like the 80s. There was a Ford Pinto that they misplaced the gas tank, and if you ran into the back of it, the car blew up.
oh.
So you drive a Cybertruck into it?
No, that was a joke. Okay, I would have
What would you
modified the car. I would have modified the car
You'd modify
with
a
like
car?
with like an SUV or truck, something like that, that's like really bulky and it has like extra plating of some heavy metal, like maybe even lead, but like, not contaminated parts of where you normally touch, and like it also have like probably like better, windows so that it wouldn't, break as easily. And yeah, that's basically what car I'd be using. Not a smoky little Cybertruck.
All right. All right. Well, I think that about wraps it up on tornadoes. So
Yep.
that said, Beckham, I'll have you read us out. And thanks for another episode this week, everyone.
Today's show was produced by Beckham and Brett. You can find us on YouTube and Spotify. Please subscribe to the show anywhere you listen to podcasts. Reach out with any questions, comments, or potential topics. We will respond. Have a great week.